doing a talk on the Haftarah, which is Chana from the book of Shmuel, Samuel. I'm going to introduce it. Then I'm going to do read a very small piece of the reading. Then I'm going to talk about why we read it on Rosh Hashanah. And I want to dedicate this Rosh to the memory of my mom, Rivka Bela Bas Chaya. Though she left the world 6 months ago, I still feel her love and nurturing every day. Zichrono livracha, may her memory be for blessing. So in Rosh Hashanah we read the miraculous birth story of the prophet Shmuel, Samuel, from the first book of Shmuel, chapters 1 and 2. It takes place before the kings of Israel and before the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, was built in Jerusalem. Shmuel is born to Channah, one of 2 wives of Elkanah, after a long, difficult struggle with infertility. Channah is the beloved of the 2 wives of Elkanah, and Penina is the fertile of the 2 wives. Elkanah favors Channah, and when they go up to the temple, which is in Shiloh, to bring their yearly sacrifices, Elkanah gives Penina and her children a portion of food, and to Channah he gives a double portion. Naturally, this causes strife between the women. And the text reads that Penina vexed Channah, who became very, very angry and frustrated by her situation. She became so upset that she could not eat. All she could do is cry. And Elkanah famously utters these words in verse 8, Channah, lama tivki, v'lama lo tochli, v'lama yera levavech, halo anochi tov lach me'asara banim. Channah, why do you cry? Why won't you eat? Why are you downhearted? For I am better to you than 10 sons. So much has been written about this line. Most of it not particularly favorable towards Elkanah. But I see him as honoring Channah for her essence, not for her utility, but for her intrinsic value, which is a different thing in those days. Regardless, she answers with silence. She gets up and begins to pray. And the text reads, V'hi marat nefesh, v'tipalel el yah, uvacho tivkeh. And she feels bitterness in her soul, and she prays to God and cries and vows to God that if she becomes pregnant, she will give the child back to God for all the days of the child's life. Now Eli, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, sees her pouring out her soul, and he thinks that she's drunk, and scolds her to put away the wine. Hasiri et yeinech mi'alayach. And Channah answers, Lo, Adoni, Isha kashat ruach anochi, v'yayin v'shecha lo shatiti, v'eshpochet nafshi lifnei Yah. No, my Lord, I am not drunk. I have a sorrowful spirit, and I am pouring out my soul before Yah. And Eli says, L'chi l'shalom, go in peace, God will answer you. She goes home, she gets pregnant, she gives birth to the prophet Shmuel, and when he is weaned, she brings him back to Shiloh, to Eli, and gives him up to God. And then Channah sings her song, which I'm going to read just a small part. I've condensed it, I've condensed the brachot, and I've condensed the translation. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar b'nivim tovim, v'ratza b'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet, Baruch atah Adonai, Habocher b'Torah u'b'Moshe avdo, ובישראל עמו, ובנביאי האמת והצדק.
אמן.
ותתפלל חנה ותאמר, עלץ ליבי באדוני, רמה קרני באדוני, רחב פי על אויבי, כי שמחתי בישועתך. Then Hannah prayed and said, my heart exulted in God. I feel strong and so happy to be saved by you. Keshet giborim chatim, v'nichshalim azru chayil. The bows of the mighty will break, and the weak will be strengthened. Sveim balechem niskaru, ure'evim chadelu, ad akara yalta shiv'a, v'rabat banim umlala. The satisfied must work for their bread, and the hungry are now satisfied. The barren woman has birthed 7 babies, while the mother of many is miserable. Adonai may meet umechayeh, morid sha'ol vaya'al. God causes death and life. God brings us down to the grave and raises us up again. Adonai morish uma'ashir, mashpil af meromeim. God makes us poor and makes us rich, humbles and exalts us. Mekim me'afar tal, me'ashpot yarim evyon, lahoshiv im nitivim, v'kisei kavod yanchilem. Raises the poor out of the dust, and lifts the needy from the garbage heap, to have them sit with princes and bestow upon them a seat of honor. Ki l'Adonai mitzukei eretz, vayeshet alehem tevel, vayiten oz l'malko, vayarem keren meshicho. God will give strength to God's kingdom and lift up Mashiach energy. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol ha'olamim, tzadik b'chol hadarot, ha'el ha'ne'eman, ha'omer v'yaseh, ha'metaber u'mekayem, shechol devarav, emet v'tzedek.
Amen.
Rachem al Tzion, ki beit chayenu. Rachem al Tzion, ki beit chayenu. Ula'aluvat nefesh toshia b'mehera b'yameinu. Baruch atah Adonai, mesamech Tzion b'vaneha.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, melech kol haaretz, mekadesh Yisrael, v'yom hazikaron.
Amen.
So we notice that in her song, Hannah speaks of the ebb and flow of life. It is not, as we might expect, only a song of praise to God for performing miracles, but rather a reflection on vicissitudes. How we should not take anything for granted. Everything can change in an instant. The weak will be strengthened, the mighty will be broken. God makes us poor, God makes us rich, humbles and exalts us. God gives life, God takes life. It's all part of the divine flow. And then a sweet, tender little tale, later in chapter 2, verse 19, we read that when Hannah comes up to Shiloh every year with the family to bring sacrifices, she brings Shmuel a little coat that she has made for him. Ume'il katon ta'aselo imo. Year after year, she brings him a coat. And we can imagine that when he wears it, it brings him warmth and reminds him of her love. So why did our rabbis choose this story to read on Rosh Hashanah? The answer usually given is that the prayer of Chana is known as the model of prayer. It teaches us how to pray, that like Chana, our prayer should be an outpouring of the soul, spoken directly to God. Or maybe it's a story of love and surrender. Surrender not as in giving up, but more like the Haftarah that the Baal Shem Tov speaks of, an acceptance, a non-attachment, wanting something so strongly, getting it, and then releasing it. Today, Rosh Hashanah 5785, October 3rd, 2024, what resonates for me are the vicissitudes, the ebb and flow of life, the unknowns, and the nature of God who raises up and brings down, who humbles and exalts, because ein od milvado, there's nothing else. It's all God. And we never know. Everything can be turned on its head in an instant. Such is the way of all life. Just as on October 7th, at 6:30 a.m., a peaceful Shabbat morning on the holiday of Simchat Torah, a day of tranquility and celebration. Imagine you are at a music festival with hundreds of other revelers who had come to celebrate love and peace, dancing ecstatically through the night, watching the sun rising. Or in your kitchen on the kibbutz, making breakfast while your kids are playing. Or sitting down to a cup of coffee with your partner. Or asleep and dreaming in your cozy bed when suddenly a nightmare unfolds and all hell breaks loose. You hear the sounds of thousands of terrorists invading, pouring across the border, on foot, in tractors, motorcycles, paragliders, pickup trucks, gleefully marauding and killing so many innocents, men, women, elders, children, and babies. Chaos reigned for hours, and you think, can this really be happening? Suddenly, in an instant, everything changed. Unimaginable mayhem ensued, destruction, devastation, burnings, mutilations, rapes, slaughters, and abductions. For us, the Jewish people, the world had turned upside down. Let's take a moment in silence to feel into this pain. The greatest army in the world failed to protect its most vulnerable citizens. Within days of this unbearable tragedy, in the eyes of much of the world, the victims became the oppressors. Israel, the light unto the nations, became the pariah unto the nations. Zionism has become a dirty word, and Zionists seen as colonists. Israel, the safe haven for Jews around the globe escaping persecution, expulsion, and death, had become unsafe, terrifying, traumatized, polarized, surrounded on all sides by enemies bent on its destruction, threatened by Hamas, an organization of merciless killers who demonically embed themselves among their people, hiding under hospitals, schools, mosques, and daycare centers, using their own citizens as human shields. In this country, the golden Medina of our grandparents' generation, our sense of safety as Jews has eroded as we have watched Jew hatred normalized, emboldened, and glorified. And in our tiny Jewish world, families and friends are torn apart by intolerance, arrogance, each convinced they are in the right and villainizing the other. Moreover, we seem unable to reach into our hearts and listen with compassion and empathy. And after a year of horrific, tragic, seemingly endless war, 101 hostages are still languishing in the hellholes of Gaza, while destruction and trauma tears apart innocents on all sides of the conflict. We are in a state of relentless, ongoing shock, grief, fear, terror, loss, rage, sadness, and impotence. Where can we go from here? How can we find hope in this situation? Last year at this time, I brought you the words of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, who said, "The key concept of Judaism and the national anthem of our state is Hatikva, the concept of hope. Judaism is a refusal to give up on our deepest ideals. Our task is to bring forward the Messianic age by the example of our lives." Remember John Pollan, who spoke with tears in his eyes at the recent funeral of his son, Hirsch Goldberg Pollan, Zichrono Livracha, the murdered American Israeli hostage, quoting the words of the Hatikva, Od lo avda tikvatenu, and still we have not lost our hope. The philosopher Howard Zinn offered this perspective. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act, and at least the possibility of sending this spinning top of the world in a different direction. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act. As Rabbi Sacks said, our task is to bring forward the Messianic age by the example of our lives. This is inspirational hope. And I want to offer some beautiful instances of those who have behaved magnificently for us to reflect upon and to give us hope. Ben Shimoni, 31, from Ashkelon, a music lover, shy, loyal, and generous, managed to escape from the Nova Festival with 4 strangers that he picked up. He drove them to Beersheba, dropped them off, and returned to Nova, this time rescuing 8 more people, dropped them off, and returned again. The 3rd time he gathered 3 more people, and in the midst of the rescue, he and one of the passengers were murdered, and the other 2 were taken hostage. Rachel Edry, 65 years old, emerged from her bomb shelter on October 7th to find 5 terrorists in her living room. With calmness and grace, she held them off for 20 hours. One of the men aimed a rifle at Rachel and her husband David, held a grenade over her head and began screaming, "Allah Akbar!" She maintained her composure and offered them food, speaking in Arabic. She said, "You look hungry. Let me get you something to eat." She made them tea and baked them Moroccan cookies and bandaged one of their hands. Later, she said, it was like we were in a dream. We didn't know what would happen to us. Finally, after 20 hours, during which she and David quietly prayed together and remained courageous and resilient, a counter-terrorism unit stormed into their home from the roof and killed the terrorists. She and her husband emerged unscathed physically, and she later said, I do not know how I am alive. Savta Rachel, Grandma Rachel, has become a hero in Israel. The picture is of an outdoor mural painted in her honor, and she has even shared her cookie recipe on TikTok. Vivian Silver, 74-year-old Canadian who immigrated to Israel in 1974 and was a lifetime Rodefet Shalom, pursuer of peace. She moved to Kibbutz Be'eri in 1990, where she became the CEO of the Negev Institute for Peace and Development Strategies, building relationships with the surrounding Bedouin community and with Palestinians in Gaza. She co-founded Nashim Osot Shalom, Women Wage Peace, in 2014, an interfaith grassroots organization of Arab and Jewish Israeli women, which lobbies for diplomatic resolution to the conflict and brings women from Israeli and Palestinian societies together. She also volunteered for an organization called Road to Recovery, driving sick Palestinians from Gaza to Israel for life-saving medical treatments. A couple of years ago, she said, "Enough! We cannot accept acts of war that bring only death, destruction, and pain, and inflict mental and physical harm as a daily occurrence. We call upon the Prime Minister, the Defense Minister, and the Cabinet to find the necessary courage to promote political alternatives which will bring us peace and security. And we call upon our sisters in Gaza, join us, and call upon your leaders. Enough! Terror benefits no one. You too deserve peace and security." She was found murdered in her safe room at her home in Kibbutz Be'eri. I'm missing the page for this. These 5 men, the Al-Qanari brothers, drove 40 miles from the Bedouin village to Kibbutz Be'eri to rescue their cousin. On the way, they passed the Nova Festival, and they found terrorized people running for their lives. They said, our consciences did not allow us to abandon them. They made 3 trips in and out of that horrific death scene and evacuated between 30 and 40 people to safety. After rescuing each carload of frantic partygoers, they hugged them, gave them water, washed their faces, and helped them contact their parents. Ishmael Al-Qanari later said, "I remember the dead bodies I saw on the road, the dead bodies in the fields. That is something that you cannot forget." They then proceeded to Kibbutz Be'eri, which they entered under heavy gunfire, and located and rescued their cousin Hisham and a local resident, Aya Meidan, who had been hiding together in the bushes for 6 hours. Ben Shimoni, Rachel Edry, Vivian Silver, and the Al-Qanari brothers are examples of human beings who acted magnificently in the face of extraordinary challenges. In the words of Howard Zinn, what we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. May we honor, remember, and be inspired by their compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness. And may the memories of Vivian and Ben and all of the innocents lost in this war be for a blessing. As we enter the new year of 5785, let us remember the teachings of Channah, that nothing is permanent, not the good and not the bad. The story of life is the story of ebb and flow. And like Channah, may our prayers be answered, that we rise from a year of sorrow to many years of joy, from a year of war to many years of peace, tranquility, and celebration. And by the example of our lives, may we bring forth Mashiach, the Messianic age. And finally, not done yet, I would like to circle back to the coat and end with a story from chapter 28 in the book of Shmuel. After Shmuel has grown up, become a great prophet, and has died, remember the coat that his mother made him year after year? Me'il katon to aselo imo. When King Saul, the first king of Israel, was running for his life, he wants to consult with the prophet Shmuel. So he goes to Eshet Ba'alat Ov, the wise woman of Ein Dur, who was a known necromancer, and asks for her to bring up Shmuel from the grave. The text doesn't say exactly what she did or how she did it, but she raised up a man, and in chapter 28, verse 14, she says, Vatomer ish zakein ola, vahu oteh me'il. An old man is coming up, and he is wearing a coat. Vayeda Shaul ki Shmuelhu. And Saul knew that it was Shmuel because he was wearing the coat. So he's still wearing the coat in the next world. What do we learn from this? One, Channah was so devoted to her son that she kept making coats year after year, even into his adulthood. The second lesson here is that the coat did not only offer physical warmth and protection, because in the next world, why would you need a coat? The coat offered emotional and spiritual warmth that continued to nourish Shmuel even after he had left his physical body. For me, in this particular moment of our Haftarah, I want to focus on that coat, which reminded Shmuel of the love of his mother, who loved him so much that she could give him up so that he could go on to fulfill his holy mission. Like Channah, we are at the moment of getting ready to give up our beloved Rabbi David, who has been there through the vicissitudes of our lives, year after year, through our simchas and our sorrows, our ups and our downs, who has nourished us with his love and support, and who I hope has felt our love and nourishment year after year. So Rabbi David, as you go into your next holy mission, to retire, reflect, write, spend more time with your beloved Devorah, your children and your grandchildren, may you be blessed to feel our garment of warmth and love and nourishment year after year. And someday, far, far in the future, to even continue feeling the blessing of it and remembering the warmth, nourishment, and love that we have blessed each other with over all these years in Olam Haba as well. Ken Yehi Ratzon, Shana Tova, Or Chadash Al Tzion Ta'ir, V'nizkeh Kulanu Mehera Li'ora.
Amen. Yashikar.